Hello and welcome to another exciting antique video. Today we'll be reviewing stereoscopic viewers. As you can see, this is just a sample of our collection. We have collected over 400 of these stereographic cards over the past few years, so today we're going to look at the different types of cards, a history of the cards, and what you can be looking out for when you go to the antique store. So that if you have a collection of cards, or if you're going to an antique store and looking for cards, you'll know what to expect and what your cards were made and what they could be worth. So today let's start off with the viewers. The original viewers were actually gigantic boxes with two eye holes in them. So you look into the box and you slide the card into the box. However, in the late 1860s and early 1870s, they began by creating viewers that looked roughly like this. This one is from the 1880s, we believe. Well, it's a bit different. As you can see, it's mostly wood, and the viewer section has some ornate patterns on it, but it's actually all made out of cardboard, which is very unusual for the newer viewers. So if your top part is made out of cardboard, that means it's quite old, probably 1880s or 1870s. And of course, the glass pieces are actually significantly larger than the newer viewers. Now we'll move on to one from 1900. This is from the Paris World Fair. As you can see, it's all made out of tin. So the ones from the turn of the century are typically made out of tin with wood components on them. And they also have this velvet pattern across to help make sure your face doesn't hurt when you're looking in. And while we're at it, let's have a look at how the cards look. So here we'll just slide in a sample card right here. And there we go. So you can also adjust the focus by sliding the top section back and forth, depending on how your eyes. And unfortunately, it doesn't work too well if you're having glasses. So if you need glasses, this might be a bit tricky to see. And we have another example from 1901. It's pretty similar, except this part's made out of wood. This is 1903 right here, and it's almost all wood. So funny enough, it started off with wood, went to tin in 1900, then went back to all wood back in the mid or the early 1900s, which is kind of interesting. And then we'll move on to the cards themselves. So over here we'll start off with some of the oldest cards we have. These are from the early 1860s from Paris, and they are quite a bit different from the typical cards you see. So as you can see, there's ornate patterns around the edges, and there's a cardboard frame lined with paper on the inside, which is very unusual for these types of cards. It's very hard to find these cards in good condition since the paper is very fragile and can be easily broken. As you can see, these two are both broken, unfortunately. Now we'll move on to the early 1870s. These cards are completely flat and they are made of thick cardboard. And they're also quite a bit larger than most stereo cards you'll see from the 1890s, so keep an eye out for these large flat ones. These are all from Niagara Falls, so these are typical views. These are vacation views. So you'd go to a vacation spot, spend all kinds of money, then you'd grab some views on the way back home so that you can stick them in your viewer and relive some of those precious holiday memories. Now we'll move on to some of the other views. These ones are newer, and with the newer ones, they're actually curved. So this was going on from the 1890s all the way up until World War I, really, when they stopped making these for the most part. They started to curve them. I believe this helps out with making them more three-dimensional. These are all typical types. So we have natural views, we have views from Europe right here, we have a garden right here, then we have a World Fair from 1893. These are just some of the typical things people used to view. And we'll have some of the joke cards, which are some of the fun ones. So this one caption here is, "Aren't you big enough to read yet?" And down below he's saying, word for word here, "He don't like his pants." Then how Biddy served the tomatoes undressed, because we have somebody looking angry, so it's a bit funny. And the last one here is "No buttons again." This one's from 1898, it looks like. Now we'll look on to some of the newer ones. You can identify some of the newer ones. These are the newest we have, coming in at about 1925. This is about the very edge when they stopped making these. They're very flat, and they're pretty cheap. So these are what ones from the 1920s work, and they're not valuable at all. These ones are really not worth much at all. Like 25 cents each or so. They're pretty common and they're just not collectible. So then if you move down here, we can see an interesting series though, because sometimes they built these cards in series. This series was made for the Eaton Company of Canada. You can see some stereoscope cards have descriptions on the back. The set was from about 1905. And it's just a description series, so that's kind of interesting that people would be interested, because a lot of these cards look pretty boring. They're just pictures of stores, but I guess back in the day there wasn't much going on, so that's what you were looking at. Then we'll move on to some of the news pictures. So here we have pictures from the Boer War of 1898. So sometimes news crews went to these countries and then took pictures of events and then sent them back as news. So it's a kind of an early form of television, if you will. Here we have soldiers in the Boer War. And some of the most collectible ones are also ones from the First World War, since these cards were at the end of their lives, but they were still making them in World War I, so you do find World War I cards. And we have my favorite card right here. We actually have a tank that's doing some training, and they took a picture of it. So it's very rare to see these types of cards. These are some of the most valuable that you can find. And we have an artillery piece down here, which is another card that I find quite spectacular. So thank you for watching, everybody, and hopefully you've learned a bit more about stereoscope cards. They're very common at antique shows, but hopefully next time you go to an antique show you can have a bit of a better idea of what you're looking at and how old those cards are.